Welcome! You found the secret society known as Emerald and his subscribers, all 18 of them. And in this secret society, what we do is I record myself talking to myself about anime for several hours at a time, and it's a meaningless waste of time, and you sit here and listen to it. Anime casts! Anime casts. A collection of characters in a variety of animated series that come out of the country of Japan, Nippon. I'm going to talk about my favorite collections of various characters from various animated shows from Japan. And they're just my favorites. They're my 10 favorites with a few honorable mentions. I'm not saying they're the best because, you know, I say it all the time. Looking at things purely technically and analytically is kind of boring. I think it's more fun to talk about your subjective experiences while also making analytical observations. And that's what I'm going to do is I talk about my favorite collections of various characters from various animated series that come from the country of Japan, Nippon. So, before I get into them, how am I, and these are my 10 favorites, and then I have like 4 honorable mentions, but how am I ranking these? These are ranked except for the honorable mentions. So how am I going about this? So, what makes a cast my favorite is, I guess, a variety of different things. Ooh, who would have guessed? So I'm judging these, and you'll see as I get into it, but I'm judging these based on kind of like how balanced is the cast, how many characters were some of my favorites, or how many characters spoke to me in some meaningful personal way. Did I like how the cast was handled at large? Do I think the cast is cohesive and functions well together as a group? It's all sorts of things. I'm going to explain why each series has one of my favorite casts and why, and these are ordered starting with the honorable mentions and then 10 and then going up to 1 being my favorite. You understand how a top list works, hopefully. So, again, personal list. There's probably going to be a lot of casts that people love that I'm not going to put on here, but that is okay. I think there's actually, as I'm looking at the list, it's a pretty good variety of genres, I think, kind of. So let me get into the honorable mentions. So I have 4 honorable mentions, and I'm not going to talk about them for long. But the first one I have is Death Note. So the reason Death Note didn't make it on this list, even though I love Light Yagami, who's actually probably one of my top 10 favorite characters in anime, and I love L, and I personally really like Nier. I know that's like kind of an unpopular opinion, but I think Nier is a rather underrated character. I think Hiding in Public has some good videos about Nier if you want to check those out. And I really like Ryuk, but my problem is outside of that. I do like Misa, probably more than most people, but outside of that, it's not a particularly compelling cast. It's a functioning cast, but the thing is, Death Note is more focused on Light Yagami and whoever his rival is at that given time, mostly Light Yagami and L. So it's really hard for me to say that the cast at large is one of my favorites. But, I mean, to me, Light Yagami pretty much carries the spirit of that show. And, I mean, that's completely fine. I still like Death Note more than a lot of the shows that are on this list. It's just that the cast at large was not quite, I guess, good enough or compelling enough to me to put on the list. Next, honorable mention is New Game. New Game is if you haven't heard of it, it's a slice of life about these girls that work for this video game development company, and they make video games. And it's as simple as the fact that I think every character in New Game is just really enjoyable. There are almost no characters that I don't like. I guess in season 2 introduced like 1 or 2 characters that I wasn't super huge into. But I mean, I love Alba as a protagonist, and I love Nene. She's probably my favorite just because of how funny she is. And then there's Hifumi. And I want to say Hifumi is unironically probably one of the best written slice of life characters ever. You know, New Game is almost not a slice of life because it actually does have some sense of progression. I mean, it's a slice of life where the characters actually do have a goal and they actually achieve those goals. So in that sense, it's actually not a slice of life, but it gets labeled as one anyways. But Hifumi was actually such a touching character that went from this extremely shy and socially awkward girl to this to someone that legitimately just tried hard to improve on that and ended up filling a sort of like managerial role in the office, which was it was actually just great character writing and a slice of life, and no one really talks about that. Hifumi's a great character, and I always remember Hifumi. This hit me like a truck because Hifumi was so shy that they all, I think in episode 2 or 3 or whatever, they all like went out to eat or something as a company, and Hifumi was so shy that she had to make Alba order for her, and that hit me so hard because I remember I used to do that when I was a kid. I was so shy that I would have my parents order for me because I was too shy to talk to the waiter or whatever. So something about that was was really funny to me. Overall, New Game could have made this list. It wasn't too far away. Next honorable mention, Attack on Titan. So Attack on Titan has a lot of characters that I really love. I would say my favorites are Historia, Eren, and Levi. And then there's just a lot of other characters I really like. I like Mikasa. I really like Erwin. I do like Armin. I like Reiner. There's a lot of characters that I like. Though Attack on Titan is a show that I think is less focused on its cast and more focused on its themes and more focused on the events happening at large. And I think I mentioned this in another video, but Attack on Titan has like a very collectivist approach to characters and character writing, or I guess I should say, and its cast that I do really like. And honestly, Attack on Titan was pretty close. All of these could have been number 10, and it's kind of funny what my number 10 actually is. But Attack on Titan, yeah, so the only reason it's not on this list is because there are still a lot of characters I feel were kind of fodder, that were kind of just there to fill very like minor roles that just weren't really that interesting. Like you would think that characters like John and Connie and characters like that would have had a little more depth to them, but they kind of didn't. Which is fine though. They kind of serve their role, and I guess that's the purpose of the cast of Attack on Titan. It's just they just fulfill a specific role in this world. So I really do like the cast. So yeah, next honorable mention, and this is probably one that would surprise a lot of people that's not on the list, but Konosuba. Konosuba has an extremely likable cast. Megumin and Aqua are two of my favorite characters ever, especially Megumin. I would put her pretty dang high up. Maybe not like top 10, but she'd be like top 15 or 20 easily. And Aqua's just another very enjoyable character. Cosmo's a very enjoyable character. It's a very funny, cohesive group that works in this very comedic way that I like. I guess there are some weak links. I very blatantly do not like Darkness nearly as much as any of the other characters. Not that I hate her, I just think she's clearly the weakest link, but I guess that's unpopular with some people. I don't really think it's that unpopular, but overall, I just think they're funny and I like them. So those are my honorable mentions. Number 10. This is my first time doing a list video like this. Yeah, it's kind of fun. So number 10. Might make some people cringe, but I have to go with Love Live, the entire series. Well, I actually haven't seen Love Live Nijigasaki. I've only seen the original and Sunshine, but I did watch all of them. And Love Live has probably one of the most feel-good, inspiring, motivational casts. And I'm convinced that anyone that watches Love Live is going to come out of that series with at least one, kind of top-tier waifu. Because there's just so many to choose from in Love Live. And it's kind of just that it's very cohesive. And like I said before, Love Live in general is a very feel-good, inspiring series. Some of my personal favorites are, I think everyone likes Nico, because Nico is just funny degeneracy. I also really like Maki. I thought Maki was a very relatable and admirable character. I think she did a lot of the writing for the music in the group. And she generally seemed to be one of the more talented, passionate ones. And then there's others I always loved Kotori and Sunshine. I loved Yu. I loved Ruby. I liked Yohane. I more so put it on here because Love Live is just full of extremely likable characters. And while the show does talk a lot about cooperation, teamwork, and working towards a common goal and backing up one another to help each other reach that goal, and then it just gets kind of touching. I don't know. It's a very heartwarming sort of group that they always put together in Love Live, and I need to finish Nijigasaki. 10. I guess Love Live is definitely one of the lesser, like, I guess I don't really have super deep reasoning for why I love the Love Live cast. It's pretty simply that I just find them to be extremely likable. So moving on to number 9. That's right, Kaguya-sama. So Kaguya-sama is one of those shows that has no characters that I dislike. I love the cast, and I don't know if I've said it before, but I think Kaguya-sama might actually be my favorite comedy, or I guess my favorite anime that I enjoy for the comedy. It's really close to being in my top 10, but it's not quite there. But Kaguya-sama is a show that actually can balance great comedy with great, what would you say, like emotional moments. And Chika is a character that is just so funny to me. Chika, there's so many memes about Chika. Even if you've never seen Kaguya-sama, there's a good chance you've seen like memes about Chika. And she probably is my favorite. But then you have a character like Kaguya, who's both extremely funny, but also kind of a touching character. I think I've mentioned this in a video. I think I mentioned it in the video I actually haven't uploaded yet about Nier. But I really like characters that come from some high place in society, and they have to cooperate with people that are, I guess, like socially beneath them. And Kaguya is kind of that character. And it was nice to see, and I think around the end of season 2, when Kaguya, her phone broke, where she had been taking photos of her entire like high school life. And when she broke that phone, she was completely heartbroken. You could see like how much Kaguya changed from the beginning of high school to the current point in time. And you can like see it in her expressions. And it was extremely depressing to her to lose all those pictures on that phone because she wasn't able to restore it. And then the other characters noticing that and basically deciding to just help her start over by adding her to a group chat with her new phone and just sharing a bunch of pictures with her. I don't know. It was, if you were watching it, I think it was a fairly touching scene. I also just love a lot of the character relationships. Like obviously Kaguya and Shirogane is super funny and super entertaining. They work super well off of each other. I think Giga described it as imagine a romance between two tsunderes that refuse to admit that they like each other. It's pretty funny in that sense. I love the premise of Kaguya-sama. And then there's also characters like Ishigami. Ishigami was a character that I always just thought was extremely funny. But then in season 2, he had this this oddly well-written backstory that explained why he is the way that he is, and it was really, really good. And when I was watching that, I was just like, wow, like this is why I like anime, because it can do stuff like this. Then you just have a bunch of weirdos that are just super enjoyable, like Miko Ino. I like that Miko Ino is this extremely like old-fashioned sort of traditionalist, super cute girl. Yeah, it's like really funny. As a whole, I really just like how the cast works off of each other. I think there are good comedic scenes to write between literally like any two characters in the show, or any two, I guess, main characters of the show, and it would never be particularly awkward or seem out of place. Number 8, ReZero. ReZero has a lot of characters that I do quite enjoy. A lot of them are likable or just compelling in some way, and I think it's a very well utilized cast. Some of my personal favorites are, well, my number 1 favorite is Beatrice. I also love Echidna and Amelia. I really like Roswell. I really like Otto. I like Ram, Minerva, Priscilla, Felt, Pandora. There's just a lot of really enjoyable characters. A lot of them are like psychologically interesting or compelling to some extent. And a lot of them were also just unexpected. Like I never really expected Otto to be like a really solid character. And then even a character that I really strongly disliked at first, Garfield, they were able to make me actually kind of, maybe not like Garfield, but understand Garfield and appreciate him for what he is by, I guess, the end of season 2, part 2. I enjoy how it's kind of a cast with a lot of characters that just have really eccentric personalities that I do enjoy. And to go back to another point I made, like I said, I think a lot of the characters are just like psychologically interesting, like Roswell and Echidna. Echidna is a character I just find fascinating. I won't lie, I'm kind of a sucker, I guess, for very manipulative characters like that. Roswell, I think, was actually kind of similar to that extent of that he was he did seem fairly manipulative. Or I guess maybe deceptive is the better word. Then you have a character like Betelgeuse, who is just completely psychotic, and you think he's kind of comedically psychotic in season 1, but in season 2, it's like recontextualized and honestly kind of entirely justified once you get his backstory as to why he ended up the way he did. I mean, he actually became probably my favorite or second favorite male character in the series just because of that backstory. I thought it was great. I think there is a lot more that I could say about the ReZero cast. I think there is a lot to say because there's a lot to unpack. I do think ReZero has pretty great character writing. I guess the reason it's not higher on this list is because there are virtually no characters in ReZero that speak to me on a particularly personal level. There are no characters that I would say that I find like personally admirable nor relatable. All of the shows that I have above ReZero on this list all have characters that mean something to me on a personal level or have stuck with me long after watching them. And I will also say on this list, I would say Subaru is probably my least favorite protagonist of all the shows on this list, and that does kind of affect the cast as a whole. Now, that's not to say Subaru is a bad character, because I don't think that at all. I actually think Subaru is a very well-written character, and I can see why a lot of people do relate to him and do really like him. I personally don't relate to Subaru particularly at all. Or maybe I do, and I just don't know it. But where I think he rubs me a little bit the wrong way is the fact that he has this white knight personality that a lot of anime protagonists have that I'm just very tired of. I've said it before, but it kind of ties into why I don't like hero culture in fiction. There's something about the type of character that tries so hard to be a hero that everyone can rely on and that swears they're going to save everyone around them. And this really, like, there's a correct way to go about this, but I hate it when it's done in a really cheesy, corny way. Like, I honestly kind of think it is with Subaru. To sum up, what I mean is, all I'm saying is I don't like a character that goes out of their way to actually try to be this sort of heroic figure. And that's just kind of how I've interpreted Subaru as being. Which, I mean, I can't lie, kind of makes me cringe just on a personal level. If you love Subaru, if he's one of your favorite characters, that's cool. Like, I can understand why. But that type of character writing is not for me. But that's not to say I don't love the cast at large. The main reason it's not higher is because, I mean, the show is largely focused on Subaru, and when I don't particularly enjoy his character all that much, and he's the one that's interacting with the vast majority of the other characters, that's when I start to enjoy character interactions a little bit less. Number 7, Code Geass. So Code Geass is on this list for pretty different reasons than the other shows that have been on here so far. So it first of all has the advantage of Lelouch just simply being my favorite character in all of fiction. And on top of that, there are a number of other characters I would say are some of my favorites. I would say C2 for me is like a top 15 favorite character in anime. But the main reason it's on here is I love how Code Geass's cast was handled. And I pretty much talked about this in my video about Code Geass. Practically every side character in Code Geass, to me, represents something thematically important. or every character discusses something interesting. Characters like Colin, and I talked about this in my video, but characters like Colin and Jeremiah say a lot about soldiers. They talk a lot about soldiers and their loyalty to their leaders and how different they are. Jeremiah was someone that was so unconditionally loyal to whoever he was serving, while Colin was a lot more skeptical. Then you have a complete bum like Tamaki, who's just the very definition of a bandwagoner. But outside of that, so many characters had interesting storylines, had their own like individual storylines. I always like to point out Ogi and Valletta, because Ogi and Valletta are two relatively like minor characters, yet they had such an interesting relationship that discusses the ideas of like discrimination and love. So Valletta was this character that, you know, absolutely hated 11s because she was a Britannian, and she lost her memories, and Ogi, an 11 or Japanese person, was taking care of her. And while she had lost her memories, she had completely fallen in love with Ogi. But as she regained them, she was disgusted with herself that she could ever fall in love with someone with a lowly 11. And that's interesting discussion about how you're raised and your culture and your social standing affects how you view other people and who you can allow yourself to associate with. It changes your entire perspective of how you view certain groups of people. And these are just minor characters. These are not relevant characters. That's what I like about Code Geass, is that so many characters just had their own interesting storylines like this, and they discussed interesting themes. Then you have a character that I really changed my mind on, and it is I guess you could call him the main antagonist, Charles, King Charles, Lelouch's father. And he was someone originally I thought he wasn't a good antagonist, but I was entirely wrong. Charles is a great antagonist. Maybe there could have been more to him, but I won't lie, Nux Taku changed my mind on this character in his video about racism in anime, and it was really about how manipulative Charles was by quite literally telling the truth. Charles has this like infamous speech, which I love the speeches in Code Geass. I think that's a large reason why Code Geass has such a cool feel to it. Is a lot of the characters like speeches, but Charles went on this speech about how not all men are equal, and this is very true. Not all men are equal. Should we treat people equally? Yes, but can you say all men are equal when some are much smarter, some are more athletic, some are born disabled? No, it's foolish to think that all men are created with this sense of equity. You'd have to be naive to think that that's true. And Charles was this extremely manipulative leader like that by incorporating actual truth into his messages. And overall, Charles's goal was to create a world without lies. And it's interesting knowing that, because he's someone that actually doesn't really lie. He's deceptive and manipulative in that sense, but he's not actually really lying. Then outside of that, of course, you have, I've already talked about Lelouch is my favorite character of all time. And I think his relationship with Suzaku, his rivalry with Suzaku, I should say, is underappreciated. Whenever anyone talks about the rivalry between Lelouch and Suzaku, the response is always, oh, Light and L and Death Note had a way better rivalry than Lelouch and Suzaku. And I agree, but you're talking about probably the best rivalry in anime. But the truth is, Lelouch and Suzaku represent interesting, contrasting themes. Suzaku believes in this more sort of path of order of making change or bringing about change from within the system, whereas Lelouch believes that sacrifice is necessary and that the ends justify the means. And seeing how their relationship developed from them being two very close friends to Suzaku becoming this extremely bitter and callous person after finding out that Lelouch is Zero, which I thought was a great development, and then eventually them teaming up for a common goal I thought was outstanding. And then there's even more I could talk about. I could talk about Nanali and her relationship with Lelouch and how all she desired was a peaceful life between the two. And I guess in a way she kind of wanted to live a sort of blissful ignorance. But Inversely, blissful ignorance is something that Lelouch absolutely cannot stand. So because of the path that Lelouch went down, trying to, I guess, forcibly bring about change, he ended up forcing Nonali to kind of give up her like pacifistic ideals and actually start firing like flayas in attempts to stop her brother. And it really makes you wonder what would have been for the best. Would it have simply been better for Lelouch to just live a quiet, peaceful life with his sister? I mean, when I think about the final scene of Code Geass, the very final episode where, spoilers, please do not watch this if you have not seen Code Geass, but, you know, where Suzaku's in Zero's outfit and he stabs Lelouch and his bloody body starts falling down that slope right in front of Nonali. And it to me, that hit me like a train. I've cried at that scene. I've cried at that scene like twice. And anyways, you see this little sister, this completely innocent, pure, wholesome girl that just very simply wanted to live her life with her brother in peace. And she could no longer do that. I just think Code Geass has so many, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that Code Geass's cast, just everyone fulfills their role kind of perfectly. I also, in my Code Geass video, talked about Shirley and why I thought Shirley was an extremely underappreciated character, and what all she did for Lelouch as a character, as when her father died in a battle that Lelouch had no idea about. He had no idea that he accidentally killed her father, but then he understood the consequences of everything that he was doing, that he would actually be causing direct pain to the people around him because of this path he had gone down. And then so many other characters represent so many other ideas. You have characters that talk a lot about pacifism, loyalty, nobility, discrimination, terrorism. I mean, like I talked a lot about the quote-unquote resistance group before, you know, the Black Knights were formed, that Lelouch deemed simply as nothing more than a terrorist group. I could keep going. I could. Anyways, my point is, Code Geass, I love how its cast was utilized. Moving on to number 6. One that probably not a lot of people are going to know, but Beck, Mongolian Chop Squad. It is a music anime that I don't think too many people have seen, that came out around the mid-2000s. Beck follows the main character Koyuki and the rest of his band mostly. What I love about Beck's cast is, you know, I need to make a video on Beck too because it's one of my favorite anime. But what I love about Beck's cast is how cohesive they are, like, as a band. And I also think that Koyuki is a very, very underappreciated character that I never hear anyone talk about. Koyuki. I never hear anyone bring him up as one of, like, the better protagonists in anime. Probably because a lot of people just haven't seen it. But Koyuki went from this complete bum loser that quite literally just didn't have anything going on in his life. His only friend was like a complete bum. He had no talents. He wasn't even particularly good in school. A lot of the people around him pitied him or just thought of him as a hindrance. And I mean, if you know anything about me, my main channel is a music channel, so I have a lot of bias. But Koyuki, being this complete bum soy boy beta, eventually ran into Ryusuke as he helped him and his dog, right? And he was gifted a guitar from him. And because of this, Koyuki, you know, ended up working really hard, practicing guitar, and he developed like a genuine passion for music that he wanted to spread and that he wanted to share and discuss with other people around him. I think Beck just really handled the progression of someone learning an instrument and developing a passion for music was really well done and very realistic. On top of that, he had a really nice sort of touching romance with Maho, which was Ryusuke's sister. But really, the band as a group, so it's a band of 5 people, and I think they really nail that sort of band culture. It's not really entirely as feel-good as you would think. While all of the members do have each other's backs and they do, of course, deeply care about each other, there are also a lot of conflicts and there's a lot of frustrations between them. You had a character like Ryusuke that I think was pretty well portrayed in his frustrations about music, because Ryusuke was so passionate, so much more passionate than really anyone else about music. He was, I guess you could say, he was overly attached to it, and his emotional stability was kind of intertwined with what was going on with the band and music. And in a sense, he was almost kind of bipolar. And outside of Ryusuke, you have, like, I always remember this one scene. There was this guy that was bullying Koyuki. And Chiba, like Koyuki's band's like vocalist, just like came up and just beat the mess out of him. Or threatened him. I actually don't remember which one it was. And then to mention some other characters, I really enjoyed the student-mentor relationship between Koyuki and Saito. He actually invited Koyuki to his little boomer band that they were gonna perform live. If I had to sum up why I do like Beck's cast so much, it's less of an individualistic thing where I just individually love every character. And you know, I do really love a lot of the characters. I didn't even mention like characters like Tyra, who is one of my favorites. But I like how they function as a band, and I like seeing the character relationships and developments as they bond together through music. And I think it's a very realistic portrayal that I just really liked, and I don't think you can find anywhere else. So moving on, because I know a lot of you probably have never even seen Beck. I would be surprised if one person watching this has seen Beck. If you have, please comment saying that you have seen Beck. You've seen all of it. So anyways, moving on. Number 5, Monogatari. So of course, not too long ago, I made a video about Monogatari, and Monogatari continues to live rent-free in my head. And you know what? I'm going to say I think Monogatari has one of the best written female casts ever. And I would say that virtually every character in Monogatari was well written. There were very few characters that I thought were lacking at all. And the only one that really pops in my head was Kage Nui, and she was such a minor character that's nothing more than a nitpick. So, I mean, Monogatari, first and foremost, just has very weirdo, eccentric cast, and a lot of the characters just have really warped personalities that I just really enjoy on the surface. But then a lot of the characters are just so psychologically interesting. I talked a lot in my Monogatari video about Sengoku, and why Sengoku was such a fascinating and honestly relatable character to me. So if you want to hear more about that, you can watch that video. Honestly, I think if you've seen Monogatari, it's pretty self-explanatory why I like the cast so much. And I want to say this, I think Monogatari is interesting when it comes to the idea of character development, because after a certain point, I guess Monogatari makes a point that not every character actually needs to develop. So I watched a good video about this from, I think his name is Crafts Dwarf, and it was a video titled Character Development is Overrated. And it was simply about the idea that a character doesn't need to develop if the entire point of their character is really about something else. Tsukihi is an interesting character because Tsukihi doesn't develop at all. Tsukihi is Araragi, the main protagonist's sister, and that's the point of her character, and it's actually kind of pointed out in the very last part of Monogatari in Zoku Owari Monogatari. Tsukihi doesn't develop because she is already a confident and steadfast character in what she believes in her worldview, and she's accepted that, and she doesn't need to develop any further. In a way, she kind of represents someone who has accepted and, in a way, solidified their perspective and their worldview, and she simply doesn't need to develop. But she's not the only character like that. There's also, I believe, the most or second most popular character from the show, Senju Gahara, who I love. Senju Gahara takes a back seat after like her major arc at the very beginning, and she doesn't need to develop. That arc developed her, and now she simply fulfills her role as Araragi's girlfriend. Now, obviously, she does still play an important part later on in other ways, but it's the sort of interesting writing philosophy that a character doesn't need to constantly be developing to be a well-written character. Some characters are just written for a very specific purpose, and that purpose is not always supposed to be changing. But aside from that, I think I enjoy the Monogatari cast more for their interactions and relationships with each other rather than like what they thematically represent. And I'm not gonna lie, I feel so pretentious constantly saying things like thematically cohesive. Because, I mean, quite frankly, it doesn't really matter how thematically cohesive they are if you just don't enjoy them. Monogatari just has an extremely eccentric, weirdo, captivating cast of characters that are just fun. They're all interesting in their own right, and they do represent interesting ideas. But what good is it if they're not fun, if their character interactions aren't fun, and if their dialogue isn't fun or interesting or something? But whatever, to talk more about some of the other characters, well, actually, I want to talk more about some of the specific character relationships. So Araragi leans a little bit towards that white knight sort of personality that I'm not super huge into, but it's less corny, I guess. But really, Araragi has his interactions, like his comedic routines with Hachikuji make me laugh very hard. I love every single scene with Araragi and Hachikuji in it is a fun, enjoyable scene 100% of the time. His contract with Shinobu, his fascination with Hanakawa, and his romance with Hanakawa in the movies, his obliviousness with Sengoku, and so on. And then outside of that, you just have complete weirdos like Kaiki. Kaiki is probably one of the most warped anime characters I've seen. Kaiki's probably one of the most psychologically interesting anime characters that I've seen. If I had to wrap up, I guess, why I love the Monogatari cast, it is mostly for all of their warped, eccentric psychologies and just their fun interactions. Moving on to number 4. Controversial one, very controversial, but Bleach. I have mentioned a few times, I believe, that I love Bleach. It is my favorite shonen. It's like my 3rd or 4th favorite anime / manga. Bleach has so many characters that I just sincerely love. And I guess let's just start with Ichigo, the protagonist. I honestly think Ichigo is a standout shonen protagonist. And everyone seems to hate that opinion because everyone spits the same default statement nonsense that Ichigo doesn't have a motive. And if you genuinely think that, you might need to have brain surgery. You would have to have not actually seen or read Bleach to actually believe that Ichigo does not have a motive. Ichigo's motive is extremely simple and relatable, but people don't like the motive, so they just assume he doesn't have one. Ichigo's motive, I know I'm going on a rant here. I'm going to talk about this in that Bleach video once I finish reading Bleach again. But Ichigo's motive is quite simply to protect those around him, protect those close to him, so that no one has to go and protect the innocent, so that people around him don't have to go through what he did as a child. That's it. And what I really like about it is that Ichigo never tries to do this in a heroic fashion. Ichigo is a type of character that would never call himself or view himself as a hero. I said earlier that there is a good way to write a character that wants to selflessly help and protect the people around him. And in my opinion, Ichigo is that. He is, in my opinion, an extremely tastefully written character. He's one of the very few shonen protagonists that I don't dislike, or that I actually do like. I can name maybe like 2 shonen protagonists that don't annoy me, and that's Ichigo and probably Tanjiro from Demon Slayer. There are others that I think are okay, but there are virtually no other shonen protagonists that I actually legitimately like a lot. But hey, there are more characters in Bleach than just Ichigo. There's a lot of characters, actually, and I'm going to talk about all the characters, or a lot of the characters, that I just love. I love Rukia. I love Rukia's development. I love her relationship, not romantic, with Ichigo. I love Ukiura. I love when anime talks about nihilism, and Ukiura represents nihilism. And I think it's important to discuss nihilism in fiction because on a personal level, I think nihilism and nihilistic worldviews are evil. I think they are legitimately evil. There is nothing that's less beneficial to this world than a nihilist. Maybe they're necessary to some extent for the sake of conversation, I guess, and discussion, like philosophical discussion. But in reality, I resent the nihilistic worldview more than just about anything else in life. And Ukiura is a fantastic representation of that. And spoilers for Bleach, but Ukiura's death at the end of his fight with Ichigo was an extremely touching moment for a shonen. For a shonen at that time, in the 2000s, to talk about nihilism and the purpose of finding meaning in life was something that I really liked. I thought it was really well done. Ukiura, I actually currently credit as my favorite anime antagonist. But to move on to some other characters, just go by some quickly. I love Yoruichi, who doesn't? She's hot, and she's just cool. I love Urahara. Orihime, yes, I love Orihime. Unpopular opinion. Okay, I'll say this. I think it's completely valid to like a character simply because you like their personality and you like them as a person. Because fiction in general is a very personal thing. It's a very personal and subjective thing. If a character means something to you because of they're an admirable person, or you appreciate their personality or their outlook on life, I think that's a valid reason to like a character. And I simply love Orihime as a human being. And I'm not even saying Orihime is written poorly. Frankly, I wanna finish my read of Bleach before I say anything definitive about her character. But you know what? I'm gonna just move on. I really like Aizen, Nell. Shinji was a character that I initially hated but ended up loving. I love Grimmjow. I think he's a great sort of rival for Ichigo. And he's kind of a representation of just like an animal-like instinct. I love Hitsugaya. I like Tosen. Tosen? I actually don't know how to say his name. I haven't seen the anime in a while. I've just been reading through it. And Tosen is an interesting character to me simply because of what he views as justice and the decision that he made to, spoiler alert, join Aizen in pursuit of that idea of justice. And seeing him fight Kenpachi, who has the total opposite worldview of him, was like a thematically interesting fight. And Kenpachi was originally a character I didn't like, but as I'm going through this again, I actually do quite find him to be quite interesting. Then you have someone like Mayuri. Mayuri is sick in the head. Mayuri is about as mad scientist as you can get in an extremely inhumanitarian way. Dude, in Soul Society, Mayuri straight up turns his squad members into suicide bombers, like unwillingly. Like he manipulates them into becoming suicide bombers. And as I was reading, I was like, what? This dude's insane. He represents someone that just really does not value human life, or at least at the beginning of Bleach. Let's see. I love Uryu. I love Uryu's. I love his viewpoint of like Quincy lineage or heritage, I guess. Heritage. It was interesting to me that he was someone that he had pride as a Quincy, but he wasn't actually particularly defensive about Quincy history. I really like Chad early on. I think later on he unfortunately isn't really, like, nothing's really done with Chad later on to my memory, but early on Chad is actually a pretty touching character in the ideas about, the importance of family and the importance of fighting to defend rather than fighting to bully. And then I don't remember if I mentioned him already, but Byakuya is interesting, as his character represents the idea of law and order and duty, putting all of that above personal relationships. I mean, Soul Society, the whole the whole theme of Soul Society was really about the upholding of law and order, even if it involves your own personal family. Anyways, I could go on for a long time. There's a lot of other characters I can mention. I really like Rangiku. I really like Soifone. And I just want to say, Soifone has some of the most attractive toned muscles I've ever seen. I could go on for a lot longer, and I will in my Bleach video. but I love Bleach's cast. I don't think anything you could do, anything you could say could change my mind about that. Oh, I didn't even mention like Hollow Ichigo, White Ichigo, Hollow Ichigo, whatever you want to call him, and Zangetsu. I could go on, and I could talk about like Zanpakuto relationships. There's a lot I could say, but I'm gonna have to move on. But I love Bleach's cast a lot. That's why it's here at number 4. Number 3. Number 3. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. Ranking the top 3 was really difficult. I originally had number 3 at number 1. I was gonna go with that, but then I kind of I guess I'll explain my reasoning for later on. But number 3 is a surprising one that probably no one would agree with, one that no one would ever see coming, but it is Gabrielle Dropout. Gabrielle Dropout does not have a single character that I don't love. I think Gabrielle Dropout has like the most balanced cast ever. I see so many people picking different characters, one of the 4 different, or I guess 5 really, main girls as their favorite, and there's a lot of division in that sense, and that's a good thing because that means the cast is really good. I think if you took out any one of the Gabrielle Dropout girls and replaced them with someone more generic or lesser, whatever, I think the show would be significantly harmed. Like I said, I think there is no particular weak link to Gabrielle Dropout's cast. Satania is one of my favorite characters of all time. I would say Satania is one of, if not, like, I would say the funniest character to me on a personal level in anime. And then you have Vinay, who is, in my opinion, like, absolutely, like, perfect wife material. I can't think of someone who would make a better wife than Vinay, and just in terms of her personality and who she is as a person. And I will always love the contrast of how the 2 demons from hell are like not even close to being as, like, I guess, mean or bad people as the angels. So a lot of people may not have seen Gabrielle Dropout. I think Gabrielle Dropout is like a top of the line sort of, or it's like a very high quality slice of life that I think a lot of people that even don't like slice of life could really enjoy. But the main cast, the main 4 girls, Gabrielle and Raphael, who are angels, and Vinay and Satania, who are demons, it's a cast that no matter what 2 characters are on screen at any time, or I guess 1 character, doesn't have to be 2, I know that it's going to be enjoyable because there's not one character that I dislike. Even the random side characters, when I see like the cafe owner, I know I'm in for a good time. I love that cafe owner. Every cafe scene in that show I love so much. But a lot of the enjoyment of the cast is because of like how, I guess, the contrast between the demons and the angels. So Vinay is quite literally the best person to ever exist. She's the nicest, most wholesome person that you could ever possibly imagine. She's responsible, caring, and hardworking. She's pretty dang close to perfection, and yet she's a demon, and she gets a low paycheck because of this. She gets a low paycheck from hell because she's not committing enough bad deeds. And then on the other hand, you have Gabrielle, the main character, who was like the top angel from heaven. Like she graduated as the top angel from Angel Academy in heaven, and she came down to earth, and she became a terrible person because she came across video games and she got addicted. And she constantly says things like she wishes that she could just wipe out humanity. She wishes humans would just die. She's a garbage person. And then you have Raphael, who's an angel. She's extremely sadistic. And then you have Satania, who's a demon that just thinks she's like the next Satan or something. And yet she can't actually do anything particularly that bad. What she classifies as like evil or bad is like usually just funny and wholesome. Bro, she even gets bullied by a dog, and yet she still likes the dog. Like, the dog, I think, was in trouble, and she tried to help it or something. I think the dog, like, lost its home or something. I don't remember what happened. It was like an OVA, and she cared about the dog. She cared about the dog that bullies her and steals her melon pan or whatever that stuff is called. Then you have a character like Tapris, who doesn't understand the internet. Then you have a character like the class president. And from the class, I like her scenes a lot because you just get to see like the perspective of a random person, of a complete normie looking at the main cast, and they just all look like complete freaks from the outside. To me, Gabriel Dropout just has an extremely balanced and extremely enjoyable cast. And it's what every slice of life should strive to be in that sense. Every slice of life will always have at least like one character that I think is just way weaker than the rest, at least from my own personal view. And honestly, my number 2 actually has that. But I will say this. The reason Gabriel Dropout, I decided not put it number 1 or 2 is because I enjoy the cast. And I think it's a perfectly balanced cast. But what's holding it back is that there is still a missing sort of like personal relevance and sentimentality. I don't have too meaningful of a reason to love and appreciate these characters individually as much, I guess. That doesn't mean I don't love them, and they bring me a lot of joy, because they do. The only thing that's missing is like a sort of, and maybe this could change later on, but I guess their characters are missing, the cast is missing an emotional impact. Sounds a little homo to say. Yeah, that's my number 3 is Gabriel Dropout, my 3rd favorite cast in anime. I have 2 more left. One I have made a video on and one I haven't. So, and you probably know what one of them's going to be, but what is number 2? It is K-On! I won't lie, I'm very hesitant to talk about K-On!, like make a video about K-On!, because that would be like a mostly personal video, and I would I would feel awkward putting, like, I don't know, being that personal on the internet. I'm not sure it's a very good idea. I don't want to like cringe too much, I guess, at myself. I'll probably do it one day, but I don't know when. So for me, K-On!'s cast was potentially the most impactful to me on a personal level. I think a lot of people would probably cringe at me or be very confused as to why. I think a lot of people look down on K-On! And the slice of life genre, which I think is unfortunate, because in my eyes, K-On! Is a masterpiece, and it provides one of the most like organic and authentic experiences, at least that I've ever had watching an anime. But, and you know, the cast is an extremely large reason for that. But 2 of my top 10 favorite characters in anime are, and maybe I'll make my top 10 favorite characters in anime video, but 2 of them are Yui and Azusa. Yui was actually like my first proclaimed waifu. And Azusa, I always say that if I had a daughter, I would want, if I could just magically choose the personality of my daughter, like what she would be like, then I would pick Azusa. And then there's Mio, who I think Mio is actually one of the most relatable characters to me personally in anime. When I was originally watching K-On!, she was actually my favorite throughout probably the first season. And then I started shifting a little bit more towards Yui. So Yui, I would say, I'm going to cringe saying this, but Yui quite literally made me question my pessimistic perspective of life. When I was transitioning to college, I had like a lot of anxiety about it. And I always remembered this line at the end of the movie where Yui said something about, at the very end, they're transitioning to college, and she said, "We're happy college students now." And it made me, I hate talking about this. I don't like it, but it made me legitimately question my, like, how I perceived change and transitioning to some point in life. I always considered myself a more like pessimistic person, and then I think as I've gotten older, I kind of hate pessimism just as much as I hate nihilism. Now, I'm not saying super bright, shiny optimism is the way to live your life. I think realism reigns supreme, really. But it was interesting that an actual anime character could quite literally like make me question how I view change. But enough of that. Let's talk about a different character, Azusa. I love that Azusa was practically the second protagonist of K-On!. And you know, if you actually read the manga of K-On!, you can actually see just how much Kyoto did with this series. It's pretty crazy. I think if you were to watch the anime and read the manga, it's like a completely different experience. But I think Azusa was so well built up as this sort of second protagonist, all for the like emotional impact of the characters having the rest of the cast having to leave her behind as they graduated and she didn't, because she's a year younger than them. I just thought that was extremely well done. And Azusa is what I like about Azusa is how she's someone that seems like a fairly authentic character. She's not too extreme in any sense of the word. She's not too eccentric in any sense of the word. She feels like a kind of real person. She's not extremely outgoing, but she's not shy either. Some things I really love about Azusa are her humility and her willingness to take the initiative. So even though she's like clearly more talented than Yui, she is like humble enough and respectful enough to where she believes that Yui should actually be like the lead guitarist instead of her, and she believes that she should learn from Yui because she's younger than her. But at the same time, she still takes a lot of things in life seriously, and it was I liked how she had to quite simply learn about having fun in that group. She had to learn about not taking her hobby so seriously that she needs to dedicate herself to serious practice 24/7, but learning that her hobby, first and foremost, is supposed to be fun and supposed to be something that she uses to bond together with her friends or the rest of the club. Then you have Mio, who I said I thought was probably one of the most personally relatable characters, mostly because of her like dedication and passion to her hobby, and also just I mean, I don't know how many people know this. I'm very shy. I'm very shy and socially awkward. And seeing Mio have to overcome her shyness for the sake of her passion was a touching thing. And I also remember the scene where they went to like a music festival, and Mio is the one that is the most seriously into music out of all of them, in terms of like actually listening to music too. And she made like this full list of bands that she absolutely had to see. And even though, like, despite being a very shy person, when she was actually at the music festival, she kind of turned into a different person. I used to go to like these. I used to go to Warped Tour, and not gonna lie, Warped Tour had me acting a little different. I would get like into the music, and start jumping with the crowd. I never moshed though. I didn't like moshing or crowd surfing. I just think that's a bad idea. So I would say those three are the main reason I just really love K-on's cast. But I also love Ritsu. I thought Ritsu drove a lot of the scenes, and she was a very entertaining, exciting character. And I love the friendship between Ritsu and Mio. Ritsu is very much so like extroverted and like high energy and like teases people a lot. And Mio being the exact opposite. It really is a good example of just how opposites attract, because I'm not gonna lie, I get along really well with people that are just more extroverted and outgoing. And so I kind of think that portrayal of Mio and Ritsu's friendship was actually really well done. But there's one thing. I'm not going to lie. Okay, I know a lot of people love her. Mugi, I think, is the weakest link. I like Mugi. I think Mugi's very funny. And I do like the role that she fulfills within the cast. But I do think, in my personal view, she is the least important character to me, I guess, on a personal level. If you just find like her sense of humor to be extremely funnier and funnier than the rest, then I can understand that. But I mean, to me, she was clearly like the weakest of the main group. If I were like rating the characters, I would say that Yui, Azusa, and Mio were all like 10 out of 10 characters, and then Ritsu was like a 9 or a 9.5, and then I'd say Mugi's like a 7 or 8. That's just me though. I can understand other people liking her a lot more than me, and I still like her. There were a lot of great scenes with Mugi. To talk about some of the other characters, Sawako, I love Sawako. I kind of dig the trope of like a teacher who's just kind of like a bad person. I don't think Sawako's like a bad person. If you want to find a teacher that's a bad person, you'll watch Azumanga Daioh. I forgot her name, but I mean, you'll know her if you watch that show. But Sawako was a funny one. Amen to her for making them dress up in cute outfits, and also just weird outfits. And she was a complete metalhead. Like, she was really edgy. And it was funny because she became a metalhead because she was trying to impress this boy that she liked in high school or something. And she just, like, every single day just became more and more extreme until she just became like an authentic sick in the head metalhead. Then you have Ui, the perfect little sister. I do like the contrast of Ui and Yui. Ui being this like very responsible and talented like younger sister who just so very much so loves her older sister no matter what, even though Yui is fails to live up to expectations sometimes. They have an extremely wholesome sibling relationship, though, and I like it a lot. So yeah, K-on's cast. It's one that's up here so high for more, like, personal, like, emotional reasons. But you know what? That's why it's one of my favorites. And I hope your favorites are the ones that mean the most to you on a personal level. So, let's get to number 1. And is there any surprise? Is there any surprise that it is the Tuaru series? If you have never seen anything on my channel, then yeah, that probably might be a surprise, I guess. But I mean, my PFP is Kuriko from Tuaru series, and I made a video about Index and another video about Railgun. Overall, I went with Tuaru, and I'm talking about all of Tuaru here. I'm not just specifically talking about Index or Railgun. I'm combining all of them together. But I love the Tuaru cast because it is absolutely gigantic, and so many of my favorite characters are from this series, and I love how the cast is handled at large, and there are very, very few characters that I actually dislike out of, and I believe Kazuma Kamachi, the author, said that there's like 500 characters or something, over 500 I think. Now a lot of them are probably New Testament characters, which I have yet to read. But right off the bat, like, Kuriko and Mikoto were 2 of my top 10 favorite characters in anime. And then I would say, like, Shokuho and Accelerator would probably be in the top 20. And then let me just list a bunch of characters at the top of my head that I just really love. So, I love the Misaka clones. I love Frenda. I love Kuriba. I love Junko, Kanzaki, Laura Stewart, Style, Guna, Carissa. I love Itsuwa, Esther, Lesser, Last Order. I love Satan, Kiyama Harumi, Aqua of the Back, Tsuchi Mikado, and Kongo. And consider the fact that I have not even read half the dang series. I have not read New Testament. I have not read any of Genesis. And I could have named even more characters than that I really, really like. There's a lot that I could say about the cast at large. It's full of weirdo, eccentric people. Many characters are like psychologically deranged. Many of them are just severely corrupt. Many of them are borderline like terrorists or extremists. Every character has like different motives for what they do. Those motives can span from like religious motives or nationalistic motives like we see with New Light. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's power, sometimes it's curiosity. There's just so much you could talk about with this cast. Characters all have their own different ideas of what justice is. A lot of their characters just simply have their own distinct, interesting ideology. So many of the characters fall to a really low point and then have some sort of redemption. Look at Accelerator, one of the best like redemption arcs ever. Look at Mugino. Some characters just meet sad fates. Look at someone like, Frenda. I mean, there's a lot I could say, dude. I made 2 videos about both Index and Railgun, and I still want to make a video about Kuriko, and I still want to make a video about Astral Buddy. I still want to make a video about the Jailbreaker arc once I read that. I'm actually waiting for the next volume, which I think comes out, I think it comes out this month or next month. There's so much that I've already said about the series, and there's so much that I still can say about the series. But, I mean, we're talking about the cast here, and it's simply my favorite cast in anime. In essence, I love how, I mean, Tuaru has this very big world, and it utilizes its cast very, very well. I'm not saying every character ever to appear in the series is a perfectly written masterpiece of a character, but I do think the cast is so well crafted. To me, it's a great mixture of a cast that is on one hand just extremely enjoyable to me for their personalities, and on the other hand is just interesting to think about. They're interestingly written, and they represent interesting ideas, and they talk about interesting things, and they have interesting motives. I should probably bring this up, but there's also Toma, the main character, who I like Toma. I will say in the first arc, he's a white knight, but he's, as I said earlier, I don't really like white knights, but I like him a lot more later on, as he actually does do what I mentioned earlier, and he rejects the idea of being a hero. There's actually something all the Tuaru protagonists do, and I mentioned that in one of my videos. And also, I just think Toma has knocked out way too many women to be considered a white knight at this point. There are actual montages of this man. They're like AMVs of Toma literally just knocking out women with his fist. So you know what? I think he redeemed himself as a former white knight. Don't go punching women. That doesn't mean you should go punch women unless she's trying to kill you. And even though I don't think Toma is like the most interesting protagonist ever written, I know people who read the light novels say he's like their favorite character. He's way better in the light novels. I get that. I know I'm probably missing out, but truthfully, I don't think that my opinion would change all that much if I did read the light novels. And I still really like him. But the cool thing about Tuaru is that Tuaru has multiple protagonists. Index alone has multiple protagonists. There are basically three. There's Toma, Accelerator, and Hamazura. So it's a very, I guess, world-centric sort of series in that sense, that the story can be told from any other character's perspective. I mean, in one arc, Kuriko Shirai was the main protagonist, and the tree diagram arc, or whatever it's called. I love when a series can pretty much make anyone the protagonist. I really like that. Overall, I just believe that it's an extremely well-utilized cast in its world. If you want to hear me ramble about it for like well over 3 hours, I have a Railgun video that's like over 2 hours, and an Index video that was like an hour and a half or something like that. But I suggest you do something more meaningful with your time. But yeah, I think I'm just about done. So to wrap things up, I'm gonna read over my every anime I mentioned on here for my favorite cast. So the honorable mentions that I talked about at the beginning were Death Note, New Game, Attack on Titan, and Konosuba. And my top 10 favorite anime cast. Let's go. They were, starting with number 10, Love Live, Kaguya-sama, ReZero, Code Geass, Beck, Monogatari, Bleach, Gabriel Dropout, K-On!, and the Tuaru franchise. That's a lot of anime. That's a lot of weird series on there that I think a lot of people wouldn't really consider. Can I cash in on my hipster credit, guys? No. Tell me what, if you made it this far, which you're a freak if you did, but tell me what your favorite casts in anime are. You can do a top 10, 5, 15, do whatever you want. I am always happy to hear. I really love getting comments on this channel from people that like actually watch videos. It's very rare that I get them, but they're always like really well thought out, and I kind of like that. It's a nice discussion. If I do read your comment late or reply to it late, that's because this is not my main account, so I don't look at the notifications on this account every day, but I will 100% get to it, of course. But yeah, again, tell me your favorite casts. If anyone watches, I don't know why anyone would. I got like 18 subscribers. Who's gonna watch this, right? But that's gonna be it from me today. So yeah, I hope you have a nice day, night, week, month, year, decade, life.